I think it's sad that uh, so many young people uh, just believe a priori that somehow there's some conflict between faith and science. And there's really no conflict. As John Paul said, truth cannot contradict truth. Um, and once you really dig into the issue and you begin looking at it critically, but with an open mind and an open heart, you realize they're just totally complementary. And I think uh, illuminating what science does and what science does not do, and what religious faith does and what religious faith really doesn't do,
Mhm.
um, but also understanding that they can illuminate each other.
Hi, welcome to the Catholic Scientist Podcast, a production of the Society of Catholic Scientists. I'm your co-host, Dr. Dan Keebler, and joined today with my co-host, Dr. Stephen Barr. And our guest today is Dr. Peter Kilpatrick, who is the president of Catholic University of America, and he's the 16th president of the university. I believe he's been there since 2022. I think the summer of 2022 is when he started. So, Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Steve, great to be with you.
Good to
Yeah, just
good to see you.
This is great to have you. Just to give our listeners a little bit of background, just of your career, you have a PhD in chemical engineering, and then spent a good chunk of your academic career as a faculty member, and then a department head at North Carolina State University. And after that, you transitioned to being the dean of engineering at the University of Notre Dame for about 10 years, and then became the provost and senior vice president of academic affairs at Illinois Institute of Technology before you came to Catholic U. It's about 2.5 years ago. So you've been a faculty member, a chair, a dean. You've got sort of almost every academic position there at the university. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your academic journey in terms of what got you interested in chemistry engineer, chemical engineering, and did you always were you always on that chemistry pathway?
Yeah, Dan, when I was in high school, I took a chemistry course, and then I was so intrigued by what I learned in the chemistry course. I took an advanced chemistry course my senior year, and I really loved the faculty member who taught me. Well, both faculty members, teachers. And so when I went off to college, I was inclined to major in chemistry. I enjoyed it. And my very first year at Occidental College, I was bored with the chemistry class, and my teacher was a former president of the American Chemical Society. She was actually a religious sister, Sister Agnes Green. She
Huh.
had a Stanford PhD, and she knew I was bored, and so she invited me to do research in her laboratory. She was actually a visiting professor at Occidental College, and so during my freshman year, I got to do research with her, and that sort of sparked a real love of intellectual curiosity, scientific research, uh, just discovering new knowledge. I fell in love with that, and I should say, both that happened to both my sons. Both my sons did research in a science field in their freshman year in college, and they're both faculty.
Oh
Um,
wow!
and so there's something special about a faculty member taking interest in you and inviting you into their world of intellectual discovery. Um, and I've tried to communicate that to as many faculty as I can. Don't forget the freshmen. There's a lot of bright ones in there. They just need to be invited. They need to be encouraged. So that sort of led me on a path of eventually becoming a PhD in chemical engineering, a career as a frontline researcher, raising grant money, writing papers, all that good stuff, until I got booted upstairs and invited to be, a department chair and then a dean and so on. So, um, that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, what was your chemistry research? What was that in, and what your chemical engineering research, and what did you?
Yeah, I, worked for a trio of PhD advisors at the University of Minnesota, uh, Skip Scriven, Ted Davis, and Wilmer Miller. Wilmer and Ted were chemists, and Skip was a chemical engineer, and my degree was in chemical engineering, but the research really crossed over between chemistry and chemical engineering. And it was really on how molecules assemble and aggregate to form supermolecular aggregates. It's an area of research called colloid and interface science, and it has tremendous applications in consumer products, bioseparations, biomedicine, and the energy field. It really is very broadly applicable. So it's remarkable how many molecules just spontaneously self-assemble. So, for example, uh, detergents are this is their mechanism of action. Lipids, which form vesicles and
Right.
encapsulate cells. It's remarkable how widespread the application of this area of research is to uh, to mankind, to humankind. And I got intrigued by it and loved doing it and
Yeah.
did it
What?
for
Can I
almost 30 years until I got too busy as a bureaucrat and was unable to do it anymore. So,
can I ask a question? So I when people I look at applications of the Society of Catholic Scientists, and some are from chemical engineers, some are from chemists. I can't tell the difference. Is there what is the difference between chemistry and chemical engineering? Because I look at the titles of the papers and the
yeah.
abstracts; they look the same to me.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you probably know that when Vannevar Bush founded the National Science Foundation in 1950 with his famous article, the kind of the new frontier, uh, engineers at that time were very practical, very applied, very professional. Scientists were very theoretical, very sort of basic research, and the National Science Foundation really blurred all those boundaries.
Hmm.
And so now what you find is most engineers, particularly in academia, are very science focused. But I would say the one difference between chemistry and chemical engineering, between civil engineering and physics, between electrical engineering and physics. The one big difference is engineers are always looking, how do I apply this science that I'm working
Hmm.
on? How do I apply it to a product, a process, you know, production, manufacture? How do I apply it? So I
Right,
would say that's the big difference between chemistry and chemical engineering. So I did scientific research, basic scientific research, but I was always looking for an application. So I have
right.
12 patents and,
Hmm.
I've been involved in a couple of startup companies and, you know, w because we always have our eye on, well, how does this get used by humankind?
Hmm.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons you went into that field of research, because of the applications that you saw in that
Yeah,
research?
I think I was more drawn to that, Dan. I think, I wanted what I was doing to be I mean, John Henry Newman, our most recent doctor of the church, tells us that, look, knowledge for knowledge's sake is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And yet, I just always wanted it to be put to use. I always wanted it to apply to something. I guess that was just my natural proclivity.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. You see scientists that just swear, I don't really care what the application of this is until they write a grant proposal, and then you've got to come up with well, it's actually going to cure cancer, or this or that. So, there's a little bit of that going on. But I'd be interested in your transition to administration. A lot of times people get moved on there because somebody recognizes, hey, you make a good administrator, even though you don't want to do it. You get drug kicking and screaming into that, and find out you're good at it. Or is that
Yeah.
something that what got you into administration and then that career trajectory?
Yeah, in 1994, I had been at NC State about a decade, and one of my mentor, Ruben Carbonell, who really mentored me as a junior faculty member, became our department chair. And he didn't really want to be department chair, but he was sort of recruited
Yeah.
by the whole department, almost by affirmation, said, Ruben, we need a new leader. You can do this. And so he kind of, he said, okay, I'll do my stint. And he was department chair for 5 years until he wrote an STC proposal to the Science Foundation was successful. So $30 million proposal. He said, "Guys, I've got this big grant. I gotta lead this." And during that time, he had asked me to be his associate chair, and I said, "Ruben, I really don't want to do that." And he said, "I need someone I can count on to I don't know, do course scheduling, write national award applications, all the stuff that a good department has to do." Um, and then when he, went off to be executive director, everyone kind of looked at me and said, "Hey, it's your turn." And I was, no,
You got suckered
eh,
into it. Yeah.
yeah, you just get recruited. And then what happened was I discovered that I got a tremendous amount of satisfaction, a tremendous amount of uh, encouragement about building what I call building the big team. So I've always tried to be a good team player. I've always tried to exhibit, some of the virtues of collaboration and supporting other people. Really, as human persons, we're called to be relational. God is love, and because God is love, God God loves the other two persons of the Trinity, and that's what we're called to do. We're called to love our neighbor, and part of loving your neighbor in academics, I think, is being a team player.
Yeah.
And, so those first few years, we won a record number of national awards in our department. We really increased our research funding. It was fun. It was fun being the cheerleader and, the champion of my colleagues. And I found that I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of satisfaction out of it. So the next thing I know, Notre Dame's knocking on my door. Hey, we heard you're pretty good department chair. Why don't you come be our dean? And I was like, wait a minute. My wife doesn't want to move to South Bend, Indiana. But it just one thing after, and as I shared in my remarks, as I was developing my answers to some of your questions, I look back and I see God's hand in all of this. I don't, I don't think I was fully making decisions on my own. I think I was being led to walk through an open door, because everything that I did ultimately led me to where I am now, which is, it's just it's a privilege to serve Catholic higher education the way that we're doing it here at Catholic University. It's
Yeah.
just it's a great blessing in my life.
Yeah. Well, it'd be great what got you to Catholic universities? You went to Notre Dame, then Illinois Tech. What was it that attracted you and said, hey, that's a position that I really would
Yeah,
enjoy?
I've shared this with people, and I don't wanna be snarky or anything, but when I went to Notre Dame, it was almost too easy because they have so many resources. So
Mhm.
it was just too easy to raise money for endowed professorships and, build up resources and grow research expenditures and all the things that an academic is supposed to do. Oh, and hire Catholic faculty. It was remarkably, it was it was not difficult because Notre Dame has been very successful, and they've been very conservative financially, and they built up a lot of resources. So then, when my deanship there was done, I really didn't want to go back to being Joe faculty. I'd been out of, full-time teaching and full-time research for a long time, and so my kids had mostly gone off to Chicago from North Carolina and stayed in Chicago. So I took this job at Illinois Tech, and it was a wonderful experience because Illinois Tech was anything but easy. It was, uh, it was a resource-constrained university. It was very challenging, and so I learned there, how do you how do you manage a university? I was the provost. How do you manage a university with my president, Alan Cram, at the time? How do you manage a university that's struggling financially? How do you raise money, fundraising? How do you, uh, make hard decisions vis-a-vis resources and all that? And that prepared m and then we went through the pandemic, and that prepared me beautifully, I think, to be the president of Catholic University, because Catholic University is a wonderful institution, but like all of higher education right now, it's very competitive, very challenging. We're entering a demographic cliff. There's just all
Right.
kinds of things happening, and I feel like I went to school, uh, in Chicago to learn how to do that. And so everything I did, going from a public land grant to Notre Dame, which was a smaller private, to a private secular university that was resource constrained, to then Catholic University, back to Catholic higher ed, but in a environment where you just got to be very nimble to try to get things done. So I look back on my career, and it's been a wonderful career. I've been a professor now for over 42 years. Um, but I just feel like every step of the way was providential.
Yeah. You mentioned how every step of the way has been providential and led you to where you are now. And one of the things that you mentioned to me earlier is that you are a convert. And so how did that fit into it? And when did that happen in that stage there of your journey?
Well, um, I went to Occidental College as a backup. Not backup. It was an accident. I was going to go to Stanford University. My wife to be was going to go to UCLA. Both of us decided that, I decided Stanford was too expensive. My dad couldn't afford it. They didn't give me a very big scholarship, merit scholarship. My wife decided UCLA was too big. We both ended up in Los Angeles at Occidental College. I met her my first few days there. Uh, I was not as attractive a beau as a freshman as maybe I was a little bit later in my college years. So even though I tried to get her to go out with me, she was still dating a guy at UCLA. Eventually, we started dating. We were actually doing research together.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
she's a chemist too, and she's a cradle Catholic. And
And this is a bad joke, but there was chemistry between you, I
there
guess.
was chemistry, but bada boom, bada bing. That's the good one.
I was waiting for you to jump in there with that, Steve. I could see the
Somebody had
wheels
to say
turning
it.
in your head there.
Teeing the ball up, Steve, and finally you took a um, and, so she wanted to get married in the church. Um, I was not Catholic. I don't even know that I was particularly open to Catholicism at that point in time in my life. Um, so I went to see her pastor,
Were
and
you religious? Did you have a religious?
I had converted and been baptized as a Methodist when I was 10 years old. I had a good friend who was a PK, preacher's kid.
Uh-huh.
Um, his dad was a Methodist minister on the Air Force base my dad was stationed at, and so I had a religious awakening. So I think I always believed. I was not an atheist, but I was not particularly enamored of organized religion. Um, So I go to see her pastor, um, and he says, "Well, it's real simple. If you want to get married in the church, you sign this form that you promise to raise your children Catholic." And I said, "Well, Father, I can't do that. That's up to them. That's they get to the age of reason, they decide for themselves." And he said, "Well, okay, go get married somewhere else." Um, and I said, "No, no, no, Father." I said, "My wife really wants to get married in your church." He said, "Great, sign the form." Uh, and so under a little duress, I signed the form. And then 3 years later, Nancy had our first child, and she said, "You signed the form." And so we went off to St. Lawrence Catholic Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to speak to the pastor, and I said, "My wife and I would very much appreciate you baptizing our daughter Elizabeth." And he kinda looked at us and he said, "I don't think I've ever seen you here before. Um, I can't baptize the child of non-practicing, uh, parents." And so Nancy kinda looked at me and she said, "We need to give this a shot." And first mass was a mass on life. It was beautiful. I remember it like it was yesterday, and that was it. I found myself sitting in the pew saying, "I wanna believe what he believes." I wanna embrace the values that he embraces, and, I can tell you 44 years later, I have, I've never had a crisis of faith, not once. And I just consider that a great blessing.
Yeah, that's great. That's excellent. The story there, and now that brings you to being, from converting to the faith to being the president of this unique university in the sort of the Catholic world. So maybe you can just let people know a little bit about Catholic University and what makes it distinctive and unique in the landscape of higher education, and why this is the place that you were attracted to.
Yeah, it's probably the only place at my advanced age that I would have taken the job as president. Um, I don't think I would have done it any other university in America. And it's because, in many ways, this is the Catholic Church's national university. We were founded by the bishops of America in 1887 at the request of the bishops. Cardinal Gibbons really led the charge to petition the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIII, to charter our university. And we were the original Catholic research university. When Georgetown was a teaching university, Notre Dame was a teaching college, we were a research university. We were granting graduate degrees in 1888,
Mhm.
1889, uh, ecclesiastical degrees, and shortly thereafter, law degrees, and then social work. And, really, we grew up and became a comprehensive university. We were a founding member of the American Association of Universities in 1900 with 13 other universities. We have 5 of our alumni up for canonization. I think that's
Yeah.
probably a world's record. So we consider ourselves sort of born from the heart of the church for the heart of the church. That we were, in Pope Leo's words, we were to give to the church worthy ministers and to give to the republic her best citizens. And we consider that our obligation. And we're proud to embrace that.
Mhm.
It's not always easy, but it's something that the entire university has really rallied around. Our board is 100% on board with this mission. My provost, Aaron Dominguez, who you probably know, very
Yep.
Yeah.
well-known particle physicist, discovered the God particle in 2012 with a group of 1,000 of his friends at CERN. Um, Aaron, for a decade now, has been interviewing every faculty candidate here at Catholic University, and he has them read Ex Corde Ecclesiae and write an essay. on how they will contribute to our mission. Um, and that creates a persona in the university, a common mission, a shared mission that is it's just a joy to be a part of that.
It's certainly my impression is that Catholic U does have this reputation of taking its Catholic identity very seriously, which unfortunately you can't say about all Catholic universities, but that's what I hear from everybody about Catholic U. So,
We do, Steve. We take it very seriously, and really, in those beautiful words that the Jesuits have used for many years, it's all for the glory of God. It's
right.
all for God's glory. It's to do His work. Um, that's we do it all for our students. Um, we do it for God's glory, and really, I think that's what the integration of science and faith is all about. It's about understanding that God made it all. He made nature, he made the human person, he enabled the human person to imitate him and created human works. And if you add those 3 things together, that's everything the university does. That's everything.
Mhm,
So we we feel very blessed to be a big part of this.
mhm,
Yeah, you mentioned it's an R1 university, and it's sort of unique amongst like the Newman Guide universities, the ones that are in the Newman Guide. It's probably the only R1 I think that might be in there. And so, what is the sort of the science PhD offerings there, and how do you support those? And what is the programs that you have going on there at Catholic University in the sciences?
Yeah, our biggest science program is in physics, and that's really an outgrowth of all the work that we've done for 40 years in several different areas. We're one of the leading universities in the nation on what's called uh, heliophysics. So
mhm,
solar weather, uh, the impact of uh, the magnetosphere on uh, all the radiation from the sun. I mean, this has an enormous impact on so many aspects of technology and science, and we're probably the leading university in that area. And so that we have very strong support from NASA Goddard, and that's a big part of our research. So probably have I don't know 40 or 50 researchers in that area. We're also the leading university in the country on what's called nuclear waste vitrification. So
mhm,
taking nuclear waste and sealing it in glass so that it can't leak into the groundwater or we have all the patents on that. We now are doing many tens of millions of dollars a year research in that arena, including with national governments. So physics has become, and then we do astronomy and particle physics and some other things. So that whole physics area has been a huge science area for us. We're pretty strong in biology. We've got, as Dan, as you know, we've got some really good geneticists. We've got some great biologists. We're rebuilding that area a little bit. We've lost a few key faculty in the last few years, but we're rebuilding biology. And then I would say chemistry and biochemistry is a little bit smaller. Um, but in the basic sciences, I think we're reasonably strong. And then the rest of our research is really all over the university. So for example, we have a wonderful sociologist of religion, Brandon Baidyanathon, who just got a $4 million grant from Templeton to study beauty. Um, and I think the transcendentals are a tremendous way to sort of the lens through which to see all of our education. Truth, beauty, goodness, unity. Brandon's exceptional in that regard. We have the Catholic Project, which has done the most extensive surveys of priests in the country since the 1970s. We have a lot going on in social work, in nursing, in engineering. Engineering's a big area for us. We have biomedical and electrical and mechanical are big engineering areas for us. So in terms of science and technology and research, I think we're fairly broad based, but probably the dominant science areas would be in physics and biology.
Yeah, that's
You
good. Yeah, I
probably
just
helped a lot because in the DC area, there's so many research, government research
Yeah.
institutes. And
yeah.
in, as you said, NASA Goddard, and there's NIST and NIH and all these things. So that
Yeah,
must be
we have
very helpful.
lots of good friends in the federal agencies. They've been under a little duress the last year, but lots of good friends in the federal agencies.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got my start in biology there at Catholic University in Dr. Penagala Rao's lab, and he's still there. And it's interesting you were talking about applied versus sort of basic research. When I started there, we just sort of basic. We were looking at how bacteria viruses work. You think, yeah, there's going to be nothing that useful to come of that. And now it's a huge vector for vaccine development. He's got a bunch of grants to look at how to make vaccines by exposing like proteins on the surface of these bacteria viruses, and he's doing great work. And he's got a huge lab there. And
Yeah, right.
one of those things you just don't know where applications are going to come from when you just sort of applied research emerges out of sort of basic research.
Yeah, Benigala got a $5 million completely discretionary creativity grant from NIH. So they think very highly of his
Yeah,
work.
yeah, that's
But and I think the latest thing is he thinks he can use bacteriophages to do gene therapy, and he thinks it'll be more effective than any other way of doing it.
yeah. No, it's amazing some of the things that's been applied to. It's great to see. I mean, how do you integrate sort of science into the rest of the curriculum? You get a lot of, the science goes on over here, and then there's the humanities over here, and there's theology over there. How do you how does the university try to integrate that into the life of the university?
Yeah, we do it in a number of ways. Certainly, we try to create interdisciplinary teams that can benefit from each other's knowledge, so that the sum is not as great as the whole. And one of the ways to do that is we launched a innovation fund for our faculty. Um, where we make specific grants for faculty who put together an interdisciplinary team to solve a combined problem. So the way they're judged is, are you bringing science, engineering, are you bringing that together with humanities or philosophy or theology? And we got a 24 applications for that. We made 9 awards. Um, I mentioned Brandon Vaidyanathan's big, Templeton grant. He's actually done that in the beauty area. He said, anybody who can integrate beauty into their course and do something compelling, I've got money in my grant to make, course awards for that. And he made 5 awards recently. One of them was in, uh, beauty and geometry, and that was actually an engineer who did that one. And the other one was beauty and mathematics, and that was one of our mathematicians. And so we're we're taking baby steps. It's always hard for universities to do this
Mhm.
because in my experience, universities become very siloed, and you're an expert in a narrow
Right.
area, and you get burrowed down in that silo, and it's hard to lift your head up and see the rest of the university. But we're trying to do this with a number of vehicles across the university because one of the hallmarks of Catholic education is that it's integrated. Is that, if you read Ex Corde Ecclesia and you read what John Paul had to say about Catholic education, it's important that you contextualize your discipline with all the other disciplines. And so we feel strongly that this is an important ingredient in our students' education.
Can I jump in with a question that might fit in here? So I think you mentioned earlier that Notre Dame has an easy time hiring Catholic faculty.
Well, they have an
Uh,
easy time with their budget. That was
oh,
the implication.
but I'm interested in the question of Catholic faculty. So, like, what fraction of the faculty are practicing Catholics? Is that some statistic that
Well, at
is
our
known?
place, we don't hold a gun to their head and say, "How many times did you go to mass last year?" Um, but we feel like we learn from the essay that they write, Steve,
Yeah,
whether they're a committed Catholic or not. Whether
right,
I mean, if a candidate pays lip service to service,
right,
and that's how they're gonna live up to mission, that's a little bit of a smokescreen for, well, they're not really committed to the Catholic identity or the Catholic faith. But if they get down into the weeds and they talk about Rerum Novarum and Catholic social teaching and, committed to my faith, I mean, we learn pretty quickly from the
right,
essay that they write how committed they are. So I
right.
would say in the last decade, we're we're at about 70%, I think, practicing
That
Catholic
that's
family.
pretty impressive because I mean it must be a bit of a dilemma if there were some person who's a hotshot researcher in some field of science and you really wanted them and they wanted to go to Catholic U, but they're not Catholic. I mean, you I guess there's some mixed feelings, perhaps. I don't
Well, we're actually finding remarkably
know. Hmm.
that some of the best Catholic faculty in the region,
Uh-huh.
are coming to us and they're saying, I'm a little tired of the secular university. Uh, could you find a place for me at Catholic University? And
Aha.
this
Okay.
this has actually happened. I hired 2 engineering faculty about 2.5 years ago,
Yep.
and they both came to me that way. One was from the University of Maryland, and one was from George Washington University, and,
Wow.
they were outstanding faculty, and I made them both endowed chairs in engineering. Um,
Fantastic.
so I think if you advertise that you wanna be both academically excellent and faithfully Catholic, I think people raise their hand and
Yeah.
they say, "I wanna be a part of that." Because you probably know, Steve, that there's a bit of a religious renaissance going on in our country right now. There was a
Okay.
National Catholic Register article yesterday
Hmm.
on how the people coming into the church right now are at record numbers going back 60, 70 years.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's just an opportune time to advertise that, hey, we're all in. We're all
Right.
in Catholic identity.
I guess there's so much craziness in the cultures and in many university cultures that you will be the beneficiary. People trying to find a sane a sane place where the fundamentals are still
Yeah. Steve,
respected and understood.
Steve, I have a saying. If you starve people long enough, they get real hungry.
Well, one person who you just hired, I guess, a few years ago, or maybe even more recently, is on the board of Society of Catholic Scientists, Maureen Condick,
Yes.
who came to you
Maureen
from a secular university, a very good scientist.
Maureen
And
and her husband, Joe Yost, came from Utah.
right,
They're both, uh, fantastic scientists, and they're both 100% committed to Catholic identity,
yep,
and that's why they came. They
yep,
didn't
yep.
come because they loved the District of Columbia. Uh, they came because they wanted to be part of our project.
Right.
Yeah, so there seems to be a lot of positive momentum there, but at the same time, you got this unique niche there as an R1 Catholic university, right? But at the same time, in higher education, as you mentioned earlier, it's not an easy time in higher education, and a lot of things are sort of disrupting it. And what I've seen, one of the things is new technology and say AI, and it's making changes in higher education dealing with that. And so I just I know you guys started a new AI institute, and you talk about that. But before we get to that, what are the challenges you see with AI in higher education? Is it something that you think is going to be eventually a benefit to higher education, or something that's going to have to rethink what we do in higher education?
Little of both. I think AI, I essentially think of AI as a very rapid uh, content generator and a little bit of a content assembler, a little
Mm,
bit. Um, I do not think, I think it's a misnomer to call it intelligent. It's a it's a Google search. It's a glorified Google search, with a little bit of a neural network in there. Okay.
mhm, mhm,
Um, it's a tool, just like any other tool humankind's ever made. It's another tool, and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil, just like any other tool. Technology is just raw power. Hans Jonas gave brilliant lectures on this many years ago. I taught a course at Notre Dame in technology and ethics, so fairly familiar with this whole area. But I would say, uh, AI is a little bit of the toothpaste out of the tube,
mm,
and Catholics need to know. They need to know what it is, how to use it for good, and how not to use it for evil. And our faculty need to know what it is, how to assess our students and be sure that you know that they're meeting learning objectives in an AI environment. And so what we're finding is we're rediscovering some classic modes of assessment, like oral exams. And,
All
mhm,
right.
I mean, it's just, but we're not going to run away from AI because again, it's toothpaste out of the tube. And so we feel like we have an obligation as the Catholic University of America to help our students learn about it, grapple with it, utilize it well. The Vatican wrote a fascinating document back in January called Antiquet Nova, and I really encourage everyone to read that. It's a beautiful document. We hired a guy from Microsoft named Taylor Black. He's actually becoming a deacon
mm,
in the Greek Catholic Church, um, and he's in the chief technology office at Microsoft. And he's given us about a third of his time to be the director of this Institute for AI and Emerging Technology. And Taylor's been really helpful to us. He's a bright guy. He knows AI cold, but he also knows Catholic moral theology. He knows virtue ethics. So we're going to go forward, but we're going to try to give guidance. In fact, we did a boot camp on AI for the bishops because we wanted them to know what it is, how to use it for good, how not to use it.
mhm,
So um, again, I think there's a little bit of hype around AI, but how do you use it for good? Well, if you're doing repetitive content based things in administration, I think AI can be put to good use. Like uh, a student comes to you and they're double majoring in biology and philosophy, and they want to know, how do I get across the finish line next year, my senior year? I have these four required courses, and I want to take these electives. And you feed that in, and boom, in nanoseconds, you've got an answer for your student. Whereas the faculty member would have to, look up the
Right.
and look up the course. I mean, so there's some obvious ways to use it that I don't think violate the dignity of the human person at all. It's a
right.
lookup tool. And we've come up with 15, 20 of those that we're building what are called AI co-pilots for. There's some other good ways to use it. There are a lot of ways to not use it. But again, we want to be a leader in the Catholic world in helping people understand how do you use it and how do you not use it.
Yeah. Well, it's great. And one of the things that the Society of Catholic Scientists is interested in is sort of the integration of faith and science, and AI is one of those areas where there's this issues with faith and science come up. But what other areas or what other role do you see a Catholic university playing in sort of fostering sort of the integration of science and faith? So how is its role in that field?
So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And I thought of three good things we could be doing. Now, maybe four. So, Steve wrote one of the real classics in faith and science called Modern Physics, Ancient Faith. I remember reading it many years ago and thinking to myself, wow, this is awesome. What else has this guy written? I went out and looked up all your articles and first things in your dialogue with Cardinal Schoenborn, and I thought, this is tremendous stuff. So I think, and Dan, you wrote a tremendous book, Darwin and Doctrine, which I really enjoyed reading. I thought it was extremely well done.
By the way, combining those two themes, my review of Dan's book is coming out in First Things sometime in the next few weeks.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think, Dan, we're seeing a plethora of really good teachings in science and faith. I would put Father Bob Spitzer's books in there.
Mhm.
I thought the new book by Michel Bolloré and his sidekick Bonacieux on God, the Science, the Evidence there wasn't a tremendous amount that was new in there, but it was a good sort of encyclopedic compendium. So we're seeing a lot of really good books out there. I try to promote those, wherever I can, because I want people to understand the rational arguments for, what most people do in science. I'm sad to say, is they believe that the only way to get logically to a conclusion is through empirical evidence. And that's nonsense. Human beings have been using logic and inference and all kinds of tools. And that's one of the things that Bolloré's book actually does pretty well is they lay out all the different ways the human persons discover truth using the scientific method. So I think there are some real contributions to the public discussion about science and faith. Another person who does this really well is Bishop Barron. Bishop Barron is a tremendous advocate for the dialogue between science and faith. He's on our board, and we just had a board meeting today. So it was just wonderful to hear him opine on a number of topics. I think a second area is that we can foster and promote great research in this area. So wherever, like the work that Brandon's doing on beauty and faith and how it impacts people at work, I think is just really well done work. And then the third thing, I think we can encourage great conversations and dialogue among scientists, engineers, and others. And we do that primarily through our centers and institutes. You may know that we have an institute called the Institute for Human Ecology. It was run by Russ Hittinger, who just stepped down, and now Dr. Catherine Pakalik, who is a tremendous researcher and essentially I think she's more of a sociologist. She fashions herself as an economist, but Catherine's wonderful, and I think what she does in the institute will foster a lot of those conversations.
Yeah,
I should mention we have a chapter of the Society of Catholic Scientists that's sort of centered at Catholic U. It's the DC, Virginia, Maryland chapter, but it's kind of centered at Catholic U.
And we're happy to host that.
And we have our annual conferences. We've had one there in our last summer, but we're hoping and planning to have every other year have our annual conference at Catholic U.
Bring it on. Bring it
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, it's a great way to foster dialogue there on campus there as well. So what is your sort of vision like moving forward with the science and faith issues at CUA and expanding on those efforts
Yeah,
and that you have?
Aaron and I have been talking for a couple of years about launching an institute. Really formalizing. I think a lot of these uh, methods that I've been talking about that really have happened organically. The books and the articles and the conversations and the conferences and so on, but formalizing that by hiring a director and putting some resources behind this so that we can just deepen these methodologies that we're using to try to enhance the dialogue. I think it's sad that uh, so many young people uh, just believe a priori that somehow there's some conflict between faith and science. And there's really no conflict. As John Paul said, truth cannot contradict truth. Um, and once you really dig into the issue and you begin looking at it critically, but with an open mind and an open heart, you realize they're just totally complementary.
Yeah.
And again, all those books that I've mentioned, all the articles, all the conversations, they just shed light on that. And I think uh, illuminating what science does and what science does not do, and what religious faith does and what religious faith really doesn't do,
Hmm.
um, but also understanding that they can illuminate each other. So it's important to challenge some of the findings of faith, religion, but it's also important to challenge some of the findings of science. So, one of the things I like to share with people is that, I can think of two times in the last 100 or so years where science was just proven to be dead wrong. In the late 1800s, physicists believed everything was going to be describable by Newton's laws. And that's just nonsense. And it took a guy named Max Planck and another guy named Albert Einstein to help inform us on that. And then in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, Murray Gell-Mann and Richard Feynman thought, well, we're going to come up with a unified field theory that's going to describe all fundamental forces. And then these guys at Santa Cruz said, no, 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 wait a minute. There's a whole nother force. There's a whole nother kind of energy, and we don't know what it is. We're going to call it dark energy and dark matter. And now that's dogma. And they got laughed off the stage in the early 1980s. And so, what does that tell you about science? It tells you that science is a discipline of hypothesis, experimentation, tentative conclusion, and then continued refinement. It's angling towards the truth about nature, about the human person, but it doesn't have a purchase on the truth. It does not have a purchase on the truth.
It doesn't have a monopoly, certainly. Yeah. No, I mean, this is true. I mean, some people today, science has such, in some ways, deservedly, a tremendous
Reputation.
aura and prestige, but some people raise it above its due level to almost make a religion out of it. And so you hear people saying, follow the science. Do you believe? Almost as if they're
That's
some,
called scientism.
yeah, scientism that you shouldn't, you shouldn't even entertain in science some alternative hypotheses because that makes you, a deviant or something.
Well,
But
sadly, science is a little bit, scientism is self-refuting. That it postulates that there's nothing beyond the material.
right,
Well, where does that come from? And how do you test it?
yeah,
So I'm a scientist, but I think I'm skeptical of what science can do. And in insofar as my religious faith goes, I understand that there are things about my Catholic faith that I will never be able to prove, that I have to take on that's why we call it faith.
Hmm.
But everyone has faith.
Hmm.
Every human person believes. They believe in something. They
Right.
believe the pilot flying that plane isn't gonna crash the plane or they wouldn't get on the plane. They believe many things, and so I think it's important to help people understand, look, these are all the ways of human intellection. These are all the ways that we approach the truth. You have to use them all.
You
If you
have to
don't
use them
use
all.
them all, you're missing an important part of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's hopefully what, with these Catholic University is going to give students, that you don't have to put one way of knowing the truth off to the side and just focus on another. I think that's one of the things a good solid Catholic university is going to do. So are there ways that you guys do that for your students? I mean, what you just said, I was like, hey, you should be up there talking to your students and giving a lecture there to the students at CUA. Well, how
I
do
do
you
when they wanna listen to me, Dan.
Uh, well, it's great. It's been great talking to you. I think we just wrap up here with one last question. I'd be just sort of interested in your perspective. Now, being at Catholic University 2.5 years, so obviously you were attracted to it because of its sort of unique nature. You said it was the only place you probably would have taken a president's job at this point in your career. Are there something about Francis or here at Catholic University, something about Catholic University that surprised you? So after 2.5 years, you didn't. See this coming in, something about it that you know is pleasantly surprised you, and you took the job not knowing that.
Yeah, I mean, having been at the University of Notre Dame for a little over 10 years, um, I don't think I had rose-colored glasses about what it means to be at a Catholic university. I think I understood that, well, universities are, places of diversity, and you get a diversity of opinion, and you get a diversity of views and ideologies and all that, and I understood that. So I was a little bit surprised when I got here that so many people here at our university had bought in to this notion of being a great, very intentional Catholic university. Our board is completely aligned on this. Uh, there's no dissension. Now we don't have groupthink. We do have some people on our board who try to be contrarians for the right reason, to inject alternative points of view just to get us to think, and that's a wonderful thing. But they're all tremendously supportive of being the Catholic University of America, and they support that. And it's a surprising number of our faculty, staff, and students, support that. And I thought I thought it might be a little trickier to get all the wagons, going in the right direction, but it hasn't been. It's that has not been the most challenging part of it. I guess the other thing I that was a little surprising to me is how good our students are. And I don't mean good, smart and savvy and clever and all. I mean just good, sheer goodness, who care about other people, who love God and love neighbor. I didn't I didn't expect that. I've been to many universities and I've seen a lot of young people who, maybe they grew up uh, feeling a little entitled. There's virtually none of that here. These are just good kids. They're willing to work hard. They're willing to serve others, and they enjoy it. And that's a little bit of a surprise in a very pleasant way.
Mhm.
So it's just been a joy to be here.
Well, that's great. Well, it's been a joy having you here
Yeah.
on the podcast, and wish you the best, all the best, that all the exciting things that are going on there at Catholic University of America. We wish you success and the university's success, and thank you. I know you're a very busy man, and sitting down and taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you,
Yes. Thank you
Dan.
very much for coming on.
Thank you, Steve. It's an honor to be with both of you. You are both two of my favorite people in the science and faith area. And Steve, I want to personally thank you for launching the Society of Catholic Scientists. I know it's a labor of love for you. And Dan, I know you're a big part of that now. I think you're the vice president of the society. So if ever I can be of help to either one of you, I'm always happy to do that. But it's been a joy to be with you today.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Catholic Scientist Podcast, sponsored by the Society of Catholic Scientists. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. And you can also show your support by donating to the Society to help us produce content like you just heard. You can donate by going to our website at catholicscientist.org and clicking on the donate button. You can also find other useful resources, articles, and videos on our website.